Well, strong condemnation is growing around the world after the Israeli military attacked a flotilla of ships carrying humanitarian aid to Gaza. This footage captured the moment the operation began, when Israeli commandos boarded one of the main vessels.
Important announcement, one more time. All the brothers on all the decks, we have lost. Take your seats. Come down and take your seats. Be very calm. Come back and take your seats. Assalamu alaikum.
Well, reports say up to 20 peace activists were killed and dozens injured as commandos stormed the flotilla in international waters. Some of the ships have now arrived in the Israeli port city of Ashdod. That's where RT's Flotilla sent this report from.
Two of the ships have been brought here to the Ashdod port. We know that Israeli naval officers are on board. They're searching the vehicles. They're expecting to find what has been the Israeli position since the early hours of this morning, and that is that ammunition, guns, knives, all of that is on board these vehicles. The Israeli army maintaining that its soldiers came under live fire when they boarded one of those ships. Now, this, of course, is being denied by the passengers of the ships. They insist that they were a peaceful demonstration trying to bring world attention to the economic blockade on Gaza. Some of them have already arrived here in Ashdod. They are being ordered back to their countries of origin. Those that are refusing to go are being detained in the detention center that you might see behind me. Now, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has called this a slaughter at sea. The international condemnation has been fast and furious, with some Russian politicians saying that this is a tragic event and an investigation needs to be carried out. This is being echoed by the European Union. The EU spokesperson had this to say.
The EU strongly condemns any acts of violence and deplores any excessive use of force. In this regard, on behalf of the EU, the High Representative is requesting a full, immediate inquiry by the Israeli authorities. The EU reiterates its call for an immediate, sustained and unconditional opening of crossings in Gaza for the flow of humanitarian aid, commercial goods and persons to and from Gaza.
The United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has also expressed his deep regret and shock. We're hearing from Turkey. It's calling for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. Now, earlier I compiled this package, which essentially recaps the events of the past few hours. The goal was to make headlines, and the protesters certainly did, but at a price none of them could have imagined. More than 10 dead, and the casualty count is still climbing. It began late Sunday night with Israeli soldiers warning the 6 ships to turn back.
We can visually see 3 frigates and a helicopter hovering overhead, despite the fact that we're in international waters some 100 miles away from the shores of Israel. We call upon everybody in Britain to help us to raise alarm and get our government to intervene.
But something went wrong, and Israeli commander officers climbed on board. It's confusing what happened next. The Israelis say they came under fire, that there were weapons and knives on board, and that the organizers had close ties with Hamas and Al-Qaeda. But the protesters, who come from many different countries, say it's simply not true.
The Israelis have always been threatening since day one from when we wanted to launch the flotilla. Every attempt where there's been to end the siege, they've always been quite aggressive. But I've got to be honest, I didn't even expect Israel to disregard international law so flagrantly. Israel went to international water, they boarded a civilian ship and gunned down, killed an innocent 16 or 20 people.
The international community is demanding action. The Arab League is urging members to cut ties with Israel. And as demonstrations in Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey and Israel itself gain momentum, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cut short a trip to North America to return home. Israeli police are on high alert around the country for fear the protests could get out of hand. The flotilla's passengers came from all around the world. Among them were parliamentarians, journalists, a Holocaust survivor and a Nobel Peace Laureate. They had with them 10,000 tons of supplies to help alleviate the humanitarian situation in Gaza. But Israel maintains there is no humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak says the area is ruled by a terrorist organization, Hamas, and therefore Israel has the right to examine all cargo entering the Strip. The confrontation took place some 100 kilometers off the coast of Gaza in international waters. It's now up to the international community to have the final word and pass judgment. Flotilla, RT, Ashdod, Israel.
Well, political commentator Dr. Asad Abu Shareh from Gaza thinks the US, as Israel's primary ally, should also be held accountable for the attack on the aid mission.
Unfortunately, the West, especially the United States of America, because they are in strategic alliance with Israel, and unfortunately Israel was given a green light by the Americans. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to attack these peaceful ships in the international water. This is why we call upon the whole world. We call upon Russia, we call upon superpowers, we call upon United Nations, the peoples of the world, to put pressure on America and Western countries in order to bring Israel to account and to impose sanctions on Israel and to bring Israeli generals to accountability for the crimes which they committed against humanity.
Well, Mustafa al-Barghouti from the Palestinian National Initiative Group from Ramallah in the West Bank condemns the actions of the Israeli military and calls on the international community for action.
These people were peaceful people with no military weapons, with nothing to defend themselves with, in ships in international water. It was the Israeli army that went to them with helicopters, with Israeli Navy military ships, and attacked them. It is so obvious and so clear. And to accept, even to discuss the Israeli lies about the fact that the soldiers who invaded the ships in international waters were subjected to aggression is by itself unacceptable. The picture is very clear. What Israel has done is an act of piracy. What Israel has done is an act of serious violation of international law. They practically attacked the sovereignty of Greece, Turkey, and Ireland. These are the countries that the ships had their flags on, and they attacked them in international water. This is equal to an act of declaration of war. And more than that, Israel attacked civilian people, non-violent people, peaceful people who had no weapons to defend themselves with, and killed 20 of them. What we need is real peace. What we need is just peace. And that can happen only if Israel accepts to end its colonial system and its occupation of Palestinian territories, and accept the rights of the Palestinian people to be free. We have hundreds of people who have died in Gaza because they could not access proper medical care. We have lots of hospital medical units that are non-functional because of the absence of spare parts or the absence of proper medications. This is a place that, where people live in a ghetto.